You are listening to 𝗄𝗵𝗲 Radio Scotland, online, on your smart speakers and on DAB digital radio in Edinburgh and Glasgow. You can download the 𝗄𝗵𝗲 Radio app now on Google Play and the App Store. Now it is time for the Science Show with Dr. Dada.
Hello, and welcome to the Science Show with Dr. Dada here on 𝗄𝗵𝗲 Radio Scotland, broadcasting from the city of Glasgow. It has been said that an investment in knowledge pays the best interest, and that's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And if you think about it, universities may look like clusters of lecture theatres, libraries and laboratories, but at their core, they are engines that turn curiosity into discovery, ideas into industries, and students into citizens who shape the future. The question is, how does a modern university keep that engine running at full power? Can one institution be both a world-class industry and research hub and a force for local prosperity and climate action? Well, on this show, on today's episode, we're going to get the answer to these questions. Today I'm joined by Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, FRSE, the Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Glasgow since 2009. He's a distinguished monetary economist, and in his various roles he has led Glasgow's transformation from 9 faculties to 4 interdisciplinary colleges. He's guided the university to become the UK's first to divest fully from fossil fuels and to declare a climate emergency. He's authored the landmark Muscatelli Report, which we'll talk about in a moment, and this has helped to chart how Scotland can turn research excellence into innovation-driven growth. And he's also advised both Scottish and UK governments on higher education and R&D strategy. And in 2017, he earned a knighthood for services to economics and education. For the past 16 years, he steered a 570-year-old institution through the winds of things like Brexit, through the pandemic, and the race to net zero, all while championing access, civic engagement, and cutting-edge science. Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, thank you for joining us today on the Science Show.
Thank you, 𝗄𝗵𝗲. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yes, the pleasure is ours as well. Now, we're just going to dive right into the first part of our interview. And as we normally do, the first part is really getting to know our guest, getting to know their background, how they got into academia, and so on and so forth. So let's start with when you came to Glasgow, or before you came to Glasgow. Could you tell us what your background was like?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's an unusual background, I suppose. I am Italian by birth. I was born in Italy. My father was originally a shipping captain and then went into the management side of shipping. And really that took us away from Italy. He moved us as a family to the Netherlands when I was 4 years old, which is the reason I don't have a very Italian accent. It's I studied in a Dutch school for a number of years. We then went back to Italy, and I came to the UK when I was roughly 13, 14 years old. And that's and then I studied here. I did my secondary education and my university education here.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us. Now, so you arrived at 14 to Glasgow.
Was that 13?
13, 14. Yeah. Okay, 13. And so what would you say, what personal experiences from those early years shaped the way you still lead a global institution today?
That's a great question. And I suppose reflecting back, it's I would say I've learned quite a bit from my father, actually, because he was not, first and foremost, as I said, he didn't go into shipping management from school. He had no degree. He was, he was 18 in 1946 Italy when, jobs were not easy to find. His parents were from, were basically subsistence farmers, so he didn't have any opportunity to go to university. And in fact, it's still to his one of the key drivers to me staying in education was actually his encouragement to say, I didn't have this opportunity, you should have this opportunity. But I think in terms of management, I suppose partly just being around in a family where he was managing a very large company that had global reach, it kind of influenced, I suppose, my perspective of the importance of how you set about managing complex organizations, although shipping companies are a bit different from universities.
Indeed. And talking about opportunities versus sacrifices, what would you say made you stay in academia?
That's a great question again. I did not set out to stay in academia, and I often, when postgraduate students often ask me, how did you decide to do this, and what did you do for your PhD? I would always say, don't look at me, because I had a very atypical career, so I won't go on at length. But essentially, I just did a degree at Glasgow in economics. I'm an economist. I then, having initially started actually a physics degree at Imperial, but then I left and went to study economics at Glasgow because I wanted to do economics. And then when I graduated, I actually left. I started working in standard graduate trainee job, and then I got a phone call essentially saying that the university and the economics department, as then was looking for a teaching assistant. Effectively a one-year lectureship to help with teaching, and they hadn't had many applications, and would I apply? And I'd done well in my undergraduate studies, and they said, well, and then you can decide whether you want to go and study for a PhD. And my father was again one who encouraged me, because I said, do I really want to give up a permanent job to go and do this for a year? And it was his encouragement to say, yeah, no, go and do this. Again, he had his real passion for education, because he didn't have the opportunity to go to university. His parents couldn't afford it. And he said, you go and do this. I'll back you. If it doesn't work, I'll back you up.
I see. Wow. I always love to hear these stories, very inspiring indeed. And, to go from that to becoming the vice principal of the university. We'll come to that in a moment, but I just was really interested in the fact that your background in physics as well would have had some impact on how you do things as well.
So I studied, the reason for physics, yes, and I studied science at school. My A-levels were mostly maths, physics, chemistry, although I also studied English, Italian. So that was very helpful. So, maths and physics were very helpful to me when I did economics, because the type of economics that I did was, macro modeling, which involves some knowledge of mathematics and dynamic systems. Econometrics, which is sort of applied statistics applied to economics. So again, it was easier for somebody with that quantitative background to do it. So it was definitely hugely helpful, even though I abandoned it. And then, as I said, I to be honest, the plan was to do this lectureship at Glasgow for a year, and then I'd applied for some PhD programs in the US actually. But then my contract was renewed. I then started publishing some papers, and they then said, well, you could finish your PhD here. You could just put together some, papers, and so I kept rolling. They kept rolling on this lectureship, and I ended up, staying permanently. I got a permanent contract 3 years later, and then did my PhD. But it wasn't by publication, but by then I had 3 or 4 publications, so I could use them for my PhD. Yeah.
So wow, that's fantastic. And then now coming to when you became the principal of the university, what would you say was your elevator pitch, vision for the University of Glasgow? Maybe not in exact words, but just the general idea.
So there were 2 or 3 themes. I think, if you go back to Glasgow in 2008, the year when I was interviewed for the job, which I started in 2009, I think we were probably the least international of the Russell Group universities, these big research-intensive UK universities. And I felt that had to change. We weren't quite the least, but almost the least international. And that was important, because that was important in terms of also internationalizing not only our research, but also our teaching. Also, it was important in terms of resources, because we were much smaller than we should be. But the other thing, as you mentioned earlier in your introduction, I felt it was very fragmented as an institution. We had, I can't remember how many departments. It was 60 to 70 departments. And then we had about 9 faculties, as you said. And my impression, certainly when I was obviously a dean during my time at Glasgow, head of the department, and I became vice principal in 2004, was that it was a bit fragmented. There was quite a lot of silos, academic silos, and we weren't quite as interdisciplinary as we could be. And although we were quite successful in some areas of research, we could do so much more if we joined some of this up. And there are plenty of examples. We had 4 departments of engineering, which engineering as a discipline, even within its own bounds, is so interdisciplinary.
Indeed.
These things were crazy. So I think my elevator pitch was, I'd like to change the structure of the university and want to make it more international. And these were 2 big themes, certainly, of my elevator pitch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. This has given me a lot of insight, really, I must say, into the university. I'm sure that will be the same for our viewers and listeners as well. Now, talking a little bit more about this restructure into 4 colleges, and that happened just a year later, didn't it? 2010. What do you believe consolidating 9 faculties into 4 colleges would serve, or why, rather, did you believe that would serve research better? And what was the most challenging part of getting that done?
So you're absolutely right that this was the plan. And in fact, although it happened in 2010, it was part of my interview in 2008. I had already mentioned it. I felt it was one of the... It's not that structures make things happen, it's that structures can stop things from happening.
True.
So I felt that, I'll give you 1 or 2 examples. At the time, for instance, when I was interviewed for the role and when I had joined in 2009, in the biomedical sphere, we had just received a large grant to build what is now the MRC Centre for Virus Research, which is hugely successful. It's a national centre of excellence. And the 3 biomedical, we then had 3 faculties covering biomedical sciences, didn't all align in their vision for this important new development. If you're a physicist, you work in an area of quantum. I felt that there was too much fragmentation between physics and engineering. And I again, you go to the arts and humanities and social sciences, it was even more fragmented, very small departments where, I spent a year before I actually started. I was appointed in December 2008 and then started in October 2009, and I was hearing from people, I would like to do this project, but there are 2 or 3 different departments are involved, it's a bit complex. And so I was hearing so many of these stories. Effectively, a week before I actually began officially, I actually met with 60 or 70 leading academics within our then faculties and said, look, this is what I want to do. This is what was my elevator pitch. This was my pitch. And I said, what do you think about it? And it was interesting. There was no huge pushback initially. In the end, it was quite a difficult struggle because, of course, when you start changing shape, there's issues around identities, disciplinary identity. So it wasn't easy. But at the high level, I certainly heard from some of our leading academics, our leading researchers, that, this is a good idea. Other universities, this wasn't completely new in the UK. Edinburgh University had moved to that structure about 5-6 years before that, and there were other universities that had thought about bigger faculties, etc. So this was that's where the genesis was of all these ideas.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that with us. It's a lot. I can imagine it would have taken a lot of will to make it happen across the various departments as it was then, and I can't believe it's 15 years already since that. I remember when I joined the University of Glasgow in 2019 and seeing the colleges and getting to know things. I was like, oh, this is actually quite nice. But it's been 15 years ago. So where do you see the biggest academic or student experience gains that simply wouldn't have happened under the old structure?
I think, as I said, I mentioned engineering, which had 4 departments. I think if you look at Glasgow, we developed not only in terms of our international focus, we've also become more postgraduate. We didn't have as many very large postgraduate taught programs, and I think if you look at the landscape of these, some of them, of course, are driven by individual schools, but a lot of them are, these schools are bigger, and so a lot of them tend to be much more interdisciplinary. We've got programs like a Global Economy program, which is actually run out of our School of Social and Political Sciences, which previously would have been, I think, if I remember correctly, about 4 departments, which went into that school. Our business school, which was 3 different departments before, which run programs which run across disciplines like finance, economics, business. It would have been really difficult to do that from very narrow academic basis.
Sure.
That's one big change. I think it's really transformed the way in which we learn and teach. We've become more effective. Look, at the end of the day, of course, it doesn't stop silos because you've got to draw the boundaries somewhere. So it's not as if because we now have 4 colleges and whatever it is now, I think it's 26 schools, 27 schools. It's not as if it's stopped silos, because there will always be some working across boundaries. We're now looking at global challenges which go from the arts and humanities and social sciences all the way to science. But it certainly reduced as an economist I like to say, it reduced transactions costs. It basically removed some of the transactions that inevitably happen between smaller units when you try to set up a big teaching program or do a big research program.
Yes, thank you so much. That's great. Before we go on our first music break, I have one more question.
Yes.
And it's, advice for future leaders. If you could give the next principal one piece of guidance about balancing global ambition with local responsibility, what would it be?
Well, it's a great question. If I may, I'll do 2. I mean, I think it's the first bit of advice is that there isn't a trade-off between being a great civic university and a global university, because if you're serving the students of your local community, they want it to be a global university. They want to be part of a university that is on the world stage.
Yes.
So one thing is there is no trade-off here, and I'm a strong believer in that. The second one is more of a leadership question, more answering your leadership question, which is anybody who thinks that individually as a leader you can make a difference is wrong. I have been a huge beneficiary of having a really talented team around me over these 16 years. I would say that the team I currently have around me is probably the most talented, and it's been in a process that and I'm hoping that my successor will inherit that team. And so it's never, it's not a one-person show. This is very much a collaborative enterprise. I believe strongly in distributed leadership, and that's my view of leadership, to be honest.
Thank you very much. That's very, very insightful, for sure. Wonderful. Well, now we're going to take our first music break. And when we're back, we're going to talk a little bit more with Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, who's with us in the studio today. We'll be right back. Well, that was 𝗵𝗵 𝗵𝗵 and this is the Science Show with Dr. Dada here on Jambo Radio Scotland, broadcasting from the university, from the city of Glasgow. Today we have, as you know, if you're not just joining us, we have Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli with us, and he's been talking about his vision for the University of Glasgow, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just now we're going to take the opportunity to thank our supporters on this show, so the IOP Scotland, and we also want to thank the IAA, the Impact Acceleration Account from the EPSRC, based at the University of Glasgow. And we also want to thank the University of Glasgow for the support that we've received for this show. So we're going to take up our discussion again, talking about the sustainability leadership at Glasgow. So Anton, in 2019, the university formally declared a climate emergency. So what would you say convinced you that such public declaration was necessary?
Again, it's a great question. I think in the case of that, the climate emergency, it was very much driven by our students. At the time, not only our Student Representative Council, but we had strong movements around climate. And I suppose you can understand what was happening. I suppose in that phase, was the early phase when we were realizing that the Paris Climate Accords were not going to have the success, that people were really concerned about how climate change was affecting the world, and the real dangers that we face as humanity. And it was student-led, but of course there was also a lot of concern amongst our colleagues as well, especially those with interests in climate science. And we set up a sustainability working group made up of colleagues who were very knowledgeable in that area. And the pressure was very much on us and the governing body to say, what are you going to do about it as an organisation? Now, it's never easy because, whenever you face these kind of questions raised by interest groups, whether they're, even if they're well rooted in evidence, the question is, what difference is it really going to make if we, as a single institution, divest from fossil fuels? I think because obviously there's always a contrast. There's a matter: are you going to have an impact? Is it really a good thing financially for the benefit of the students and the staff of the university? Because ultimately, what we do with our, in the case of what do we mean by divesting from fossil fuels? We mean using our university endowments and no longer investing them in fossil fuels, and that may mean less to spend on scholarships. It may mean less to spend on research. So there's a real trade-off. But actually, what the real credit for this, I think, does go to the staff involved in the Sustainability Working Group and in the students, because they presented really strong evidence, not only that this was a moral imperative, but also that actually it was, in the long run, it was also in our interest, because, of course, we know that fossil fuel companies also could become stranded assets. Because they are investing, they're not, their price in the stock market doesn't properly take into account the fact that ultimately there's going to be a correction, and therefore this could, and so in the end it was the combination of those arguments, the scientific argument, the moral argument, and actually the financial imperative that this is probably not a bad thing for us to do, and that created, I think, the coalition around it.
I see. Wow. So looking back then, what have been the biggest financial or cultural lessons from that decision, from this vantage point?
Yeah, I would say I think that was an important step. It was done over a period of time. In fact, we completed the divestment about a year ago. It was done over a period of 10 years. I think it was important because I think it shows the importance of using research and knowledge to inform decisions in a university. We often complain that the world doesn't always take information into account, that we've seen the prevalence of disinformation and poor science or quasi-science being used, and actually it's quite important for these discussions to happen in a rational way within universities. We are communities of rational people, so I think that's one lesson. The other lesson, I think, is that although of course it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference to the path of climate change, unfortunately, with a single university doing this doesn't make a difference. It was followed by others. But the other thing is, it's also led, more importantly, I think, to a more important step, is that we then adopted a strategy around how we are preparing for climate change and sustainability, the Glasgow Green Strategy, which was adopted after that decision, and that is even more important, because that will make a big difference in our adaptation to climate change, but also hopefully in creating leadership around climate change from similar institutions that do have a big carbon footprint, like a university.
Yes, I like that leadership. The leadership aspect really strikes a chord. Fantastic. And moving on to smart campus innovations at the university, which campus projects would you say illustrate how research can translate directly into sustainability practice?
So that's a great question. We could spend a whole program talking about
Indeed.
that. I would say we've done a lot of investment in our campus, both in terms of how technology supports learning and teaching. Our James McCune Smith Learning Hub was actually all about developing new technology-enabled spaces, and that was important because we know that the nature of learning is changing towards much more active learning, so having good technology is helpful. But in terms of research, obviously the creation of spaces like the Advanced Research Centre was all about trying to force even greater interdisciplinary research. That building was not based around a single school or college, but it was around some themes that could change over time, and they have changed over time. One of them was actually global sustainable development, although, to be honest, that's not the only research theme through which sustainability operates. We know that if we are to make a real difference in terms of changing, adapting to climate change, it's not just about issues around sustainability. It's also about engineering solutions. It's also around new ways of having new technologies around medicine and health, because we are going to be subject to much greater impact from climate change and zoonotic diseases, and will require better devices and so I'm not saying that the Advanced Research Centre is all about sustainability, quite the opposite, but I think the technology that we've invested in a campus, whether it's in research or learning and teaching, inevitably is related to a lot of these debates that are happening around the changing nature of our planet and how we have to respond to that.
Yes.
So, and just perhaps as the fact that the ARC, the Advanced Research Centre, also has the Centre for Sustainable Solutions and our Centre for Sustainable Energy, it's created a bit of a focus around these big societal challenges, of which climate change sustainability is one, but as I said, many of them, health, inequality, are also related to climate change and sustainability.
Wow, that's interesting. So the Mazumdar Shaw Advanced Research Centre. Yes, that's a great addition to our campus. You should visit sometime. Please do. It's open. The ground floor is open to the public. There's a cafe. We have lots of science festivals, as you know, 𝗄𝗵𝗂. And hopefully members of the public who are listening to this can say, let's go and see what's on show, and let me go to the cafe and see what research at Glasgow is about. Yes, absolutely. So now let's move a bit into the discussion of the Muscatelli report. Yeah. So what would you say? So this report that called for a national mission to link university research with business and research and development. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Yes, no, happy. And it was I was approached by the Scottish government, by 4 Scottish government ministers at the time in 2018-19 to write this report, which I did. In a sense, it's slightly frustrating because I think I'm quite actually, having read back the report before this interview, I'm actually very pleased with many of the recommendations that were made. Still absolutely apply today. They are very much about what we as a sector, as a higher education sector, can do for innovation. But at the same time, it's a bit frustrating, and it's not all fault of any particular person, but not all of those recommendations were implemented. Some of them were taken forward, but some of them weren't, and to some extent that was due because, of course, next year we had the global pandemic, so government's focus was probably elsewhere. Some of the things were implemented, so we're seeing, for instance, one of the recommendations was around the Scottish National Investment Bank doing more in the innovation space, creating better connectivity at regional level, which we do in Glasgow. We've got good connectivity between our higher education institutions and industry. But some of them we haven't taken forward. We need to collaborate more across our universities. We need to look at about how we sustainably fund our universities. And that hasn't been addressed. If anything, since 2018-19, when the report was written, in the last 7 years, we've seen an erosion of the funding for research and innovation which come to universities. So is what's good is that we're doing some of the things, but disappointingly we haven't implemented a lot of this, and it's still very relevant now because we're seeing economic growth is not really taking off in the UK and in Scotland, and there's a lot of work to be done. Thanks for sharing that. I was going to ask about that, but yeah, that's really well explained. Hopefully some of the policymakers get to listen to this episode as well, and absolutely, yeah, that would be good. So now or two more questions before we go for another music break. In practical terms, how would you say can a research-intensive university accelerate inclusive economic growth without diluting its core academic mission? Because these are two aspects, aren't they?
Absolutely, and it has to be a balance. And again, this is an area where Glasgow has shifted over time. If you look back 10, 15 years ago, I would say we were probably better known for our discovery research, or not that the research we did was necessarily not immediately applied. It's just I don't think we thought as actively about innovation and economic development. We've recently built up our innovation and economic development function in Glasgow. We're thinking about the spaces where that can happen. So if you go back again to the Advanced Research Centre, we always knew it was going to drive research. One of the big positive surprises is that just how much innovation is generated. So there's a number of spin-out companies that have come out from the groups there. Now, what we're doing now is to try to develop some other spaces, because we can't have spin-out companies embedded simply within our research spaces. That they take up space and they need to operate, but they need to be close proximity to the research. So I think these are the things that we need to do. We need to make sure we support our spin-outs. We need to make sure that they have the opportunity, for those that choose and where it's important, to stay in proximity to our scientific base. And frankly, the third is not a problem we can solve as a university, but it's really important across all of the UK in research intensives. Is how do we really fund universities at that proof of concept stage? And that was one of the recommendations in the report, the Muscatelli report, actually, that the government has implemented. We now have a small proof of concept fund. It's only, I think, around 3 million, but at least it's there. In Scottish government, there's also, of course, UK proof of concept funding through the research councils. But so that's important, but we don't have the kind of scale-up funding in the UK that is really important. If we really want to rival the US, for instance, around how we translate science into innovation, we need to do much more around mobilizing that scale-up funding.
Thanks very much for shedding light on that. That's really, really insightful. Wow, amazing. Time flies on this show, doesn't it? We have one more segment, but before that, we're going to take another music break, and we'll be right back. Well, you are welcome back to the Science Show on Jambo Radio, Scotland. And as usual, we're broadcasting from the city of Glasgow. Once again, we'd like to shout out to our sponsors, IOP Scotland, the PSRC IAA for the support to our research, also allowing us to have all this fantastic science to discuss on this show. And remember, you can listen on DAB. So you can also listen and watch us live at jamboradio.co.uk and our YouTube channel as well. You can watch previous episodes from our YouTube channel as well. So please do catch up with these episodes and continue to give us all those likes and comments and shares. It goes a long way. Now back to our discussion with Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, the principal of the University of Glasgow. So we've talked about a lot of things, obviously. If you're just joining us, of course, you can catch up later. But now we're going to talk about Prof Muscatelli's legacy, the lessons learned, and looking forward into the future. So, Anton, when you look back over nearly 16 years as principal, I know this is a difficult question, so feel free to not answer it if you want. But which single achievement, whether a research milestone, a student success story, or a civic partnership, what would you say best captures what you hoped to accomplish?
It's a difficult question, as you say, Adetunmise. I think if I had to single one thing out, and it's difficult because, of course, we've had this incredible growth and development. We've got this wonderful new campus extension that we talked about. But I would probably say one thing. I mean, one of the strap lines that we use at the moment quite a lot is that we don't want just to be one of the best universities in the world, which we are, objectively, but we want to be the best university for the world. And we've talked a bit about that around what we're doing around some themes like sustainability, health, etc. But that's really important to me, because it doesn't matter whether you're working in the arts or humanities or in physics or in biomedical sciences or in social sciences, this is something that you can be interested in. And what difference are you going to make? What positive difference to change the world for the better? And I think this notion that we are a world-changing university, we are a university for the world, is one I would like to think is one that I feel very proud of, not because it's mine in any way, it's because it's ours, and it's because it's something that genuinely comes through whenever we're talking about the next university strategy that will be adopted next year after I leave. That's the one thing that people really feed back to us, all staff and colleagues and all colleagues and students say. We are very proud to be a university for the world. We want to be we are a world-changing university, and we want to be a world-changing university. So I think it's that culture, if you like, I would hope doesn't change,
Yeah, it's a fantastic culture. Certainly something I noticed when I joined the university, this idea of, world-changing, and it's really nice to see. And I like what you said about being the best university, or one of the best universities for the world, is a really nice one. Thanks very much for that. So when it comes to handing over the baton, as it were, what 3 things would you most like your successor to protect or accelerate to ensure Glasgow remains a beacon for world-class research and socially engaged research as well?
I think one of the things I said, and I said this, when I stepped down, is I hope that Glasgow would retain that real sense of ambition going forward. And whatever changes will happen, and there'll be many, many changes because the world changes around us, so we have to adapt. But I think being an ambitious institution, I think, is really, really important. Because frankly, we're going into some really difficult times for society and for universities as well, given the fiscal situation. So being ambitious, I think, is important. We mustn't diminish that ambition. The second thing I would say is to remember that we've been through difficult times as an economy, as a society. We've had the great financial crisis in 2008. We've had COVID. We've had inflation and cost of living crisis. But it doesn't mean that you can't thrive. So be optimistic. I think that's the second thing. Be outward looking, be optimistic. There are ways, but you need to be and the third thing is to be resilient, adaptable, and therefore resilient. So, and I'm sorry, these are very high level things, but I think it's really important. We were very resilient, we were very adaptable during the COVID crisis, and I think that sort of approach of pulling together as a community when difficulties hit is going to be even more important going forward, because we are going to see even more difficult times ahead for the reasons we have discussed so far in the programme. So these for me are the 2 or 3 key themes. Beyond that, of course, the university will change. The university will be different in the 30s, the 2030s and 2040s than it was in the 2020s. But that's normal.
Yes, it is. I really like that. Thanks very much for sharing that. I took notes. So ambition, be optimistic, and be adaptable and resilient. That's nuggets, definitely what they're waiting gold, as it were. Fantastic. So the last couple of questions now. There's one I really wanted to ask you. I know I asked something similar before, but when you think about the, rankings, the reports, so let's put those aside, but is there anything, perhaps something, personal to yourself, that reminds you why university leadership is worth all the work, all the long hours?
I think it's a great question. It's a difficult question. I think certainly when I've been obviously reflecting a lot over the last few weeks as I'm coming very much to the end of my period at Glasgow, I think it's realizing that there's a really long golden thread between what you do at different points in your career, and it doesn't just count. It counts for everybody who's involved in a university. When you're a student, when you then transition to working in universities. And I think it's keeping a hold of those golden threads, because they will all return in some form. I mean, I certainly still draw now on experiences that I had as a fixed-term lecturer, as a PhD student, as a junior leader, as somebody who was class course coordinator. Those experiences are ones you always have to come back to and draw on, because that's what your colleagues are going through at the moment, and it helps you constantly to relate to the environment. Otherwise, the danger is you become detached as you. So that's one of my sort of main issues, personal issues. The second thing is, as you're about to leave an office like this, and it's been as I've said before, it's been probably one of the biggest privilege of my life to be able to be principal at the University of Glasgow, is that you feel slightly torn, and you feel you're leaving something behind. But it's to make sure that in terms of going forward, you can hold on to those, at least some nuggets from what we've been able to achieve as a community, because those will hopefully reinforce me personally as I go forward and as I do other things, and it doesn't feel like, well, that's the end of what my contribution hopefully to society or to my community at the university.
Wow, that's wonderful. As you said, it's a privilege. It has to be, because not everyone makes it to positions like the principal of the university. So what would you say, if there's anything, what would you say takes you from being a lecturer to becoming the principal of the university?
Look, I don't think there's a thing. I one thing perhaps we didn't discuss a lot is all of my moves into university administration and management were totally serendipitous. I wasn't planning to be head of the department back in 1995 when I became head of the department of economics. It just happened because my predecessor decided to retire, and at the time there was quite a lot of flux. And when I became dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, which at that point was an elected position, I decided at the very last minute. Somebody said, do you want to stand? Oh, I haven't thought about it. So none of this was planned. I wasn't planning to become, obviously once you become kind of a vice principal at the university, then you do think about, do I want to do but everything else was pretty serendipitous. So I suppose one lesson, one reflection is that the best, I think some of the best decisions you make in life are not planned. They come your way. And at that point, you always have to make a choice. Do I do this or do I not? Yeah. And if you don't do it, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's the archetypal sliding doors moment. That's an alternative time path, and you choose not to do that. That is still okay. That is still okay. There will be other opportunities. There will be other moments that you can make positive decisions in your life.
Wow, that's amazing. Really, really nice. Thank you so much. And if I may ask, what's next? After your it ends. Is it in September?
Yeah, I've finished at the end of September, and my successor, Professor Andy Schofield, takes over on the 1st of October. So that's it. Yeah. So what's next? Yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate. I've just been elected at the beginning of April as the president of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, which is nice, and it's Scotland's National Academy. It's not a full-time role. It's and I still do a number of things in higher education. I chair a number of committees and boards. I'm a chair of the board of trustees of my own discipline, the Royal Economic Society. So hopefully I can give a little back to economics as well. And so I'm going to try and hopefully I'll have a little more time for writing. I'm actually going to be an honorary professor in a business school, so I'm not going to another university. You will still see me occasionally in Glasgow, in the ARC or in the business school, and I'll be spending a bit of time there, not doing research, but occasionally scribbling away about policy or whatever.
Wonderful. That's great to know. That's really great to know. And okay, I know I said I'll ask 2 more questions, but can I ask maybe 1 or 2 more?
Of course.
So you were knighted in 2017. What was that like? What was that experience like for you? Do you still have? What do you have to do as a knight? What does it actually mean in practice?
Well, it's a national honor, of course, and you don't have to do anything in particular. I am proud of it, actually, but I'm proud of it also because I as I said at the time, I see it as an honour for the university as well. You know, I would not have received it had the University of North Glasgow not been so successful. I mean, from a personal point of view, I have very clear memories of that day. I have one regret because I wish my father had been there to be at Buckingham Palace with me to receive it. He passed away 5 years before. I suppose that's one regret. But no, it was a wonderful day, and and I'm very proud of it. I've been honoured by, as I said, I'm both Italian and British. I'm very proud of my dual nationality. I've been honoured by the Italian government as well with the equivalent. And it's in both cases, it's a personal honour, but I also see it as very much as something which, for the communities I've worked with, whether it's, back in 2008, it was 𝗗𝗵𝗏 University and then my own discipline, but in 2017, it was the University of Glasgow. So hopefully, it's an award for the whole of the University of Glasgow.
Wonderful.
And I should say one other thing, actually.
Yes, please.
I was also very lucky during my time at Glasgow. We won 3 Queen's Anniversary prizes as a university, and these are we nominate parts of our work for this. And the latest one was for the Centre for Robert Burns Studies in Glasgow. But it's actually it's not many universities win. It happens every 2 years, and not many universities win prizes pretty much almost every 2 years. We've won 3 out of 4 rounds.
Wow.
And again, I think it shows you. And again, it's awarded usually at a royal palace by the sovereign, and I think it's a fantastic celebration of higher education. So I'm really pleased that the university's won these national honours, because it's not just about individuals, as I say, it's about what we can achieve as a team, as Team U of G.
Yes, Team U of G all the way. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you mentioned about the knighthood, the equivalent in Italy. Could you say a bit more about that? So, is it the Star of the Order or something? Yeah,
this was given in 2008. The equivalent of the Foreign Office in Italy. The Minister for Foreign Affairs gets to nominate people to the President of the Republic, and the President of the Republic gave me this in 2008. I was at 𝗗𝗏 at the time, and I remember my dad definitely being my parents being very, very proud at the time, and I was able to celebrate that with them both. So that was a nice memory. So I was recognised by the Italian government in 2008.
I see. And what's it called in Italian?
Ordine della Stella d'Italia.
Okay. Ordine della Stella.
Ordine della Stella. It was one of those honours that's changed over time, but essentially it's one of 1 or 2 orders that the Italian government offers, and recognition, and actually it tends to be around Italian National Day, and even now when we celebrate Italian National Day, which is on the 2nd of June, there's always some recognitions of the in that particular kind of national honour system.
Fantastic. Wow, wonderful. There's so much to talk about. Honestly, we could start a new sort of episode afresh, but in the interest of time, we'll have to call it a day. But before we go, there's something you've probably seen in the previous episodes as well. Guests who come on the show, we get them to sing or rap, do something like that. So, but I would do that. Just kidding.
I'm not very good at that, rapping or singing, I should say.
But if you have any jokes to share with us, that would be nice. That would be great as well.
Oh gosh.
There's one. Okay, maybe you could explain the meaning of this one.
Okay.
So it's one about an economist. So it says a physicist, a chemist, and an economist are stranded on a desert island.
Yes.
And so the only thing on the island besides 3 academics is a single can of beans. They're discussing how to get it open.
Yeah.
The physicist says, why don't we build a fire and heat up the can until the pressure pops, explodes the whole thing. And the chemist says, no, the beans will fly all over the place and land on the ground and get sandy and the food will be ruined. And then the chemist says, okay, instead, why don't we use the corrosive power of the ocean salt water to eat away the lid?
Yes.
But the economist said something interesting, and I want to get the joke in that. If you could help us with this. It says, the economic protest, it says, that would take too long, we'll starve before then. I have a better idea. assume a can opener.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very cruel joke on economists, and it's because economics is often accused of building models that are not closely linked to reality. And
I see.
so economic models often make major assumptions, and they say, let's assume X, Y, and Z. And the reason for that, but the reason we do that is there's a very good reason, because unlike physical experiments or chemical experiments where you can control the conditions, in economics, most of the things, there are multiple effects from the economic environment. So if you want to isolate the key ones you're trying to model, you will typically say, let's assume that we're not modeling X, Y, and Z. So economists are a bit more like engineers. They have to ignore certain things because you can't model everything that's happening. So it all ends up in the residual error when you're trying to do so that's a very cruel kind of way of twisting it around. I have a better joke for you as economists. I say economists are the people who tell you tomorrow why the things that should have happened today didn't happen, and because we're very good at ex post rationalization. Again, that's due to the fact that we assume that certain things happen, they don't happen, and then people say, well, but I can tell you why we were still right, why we were still correct in our model. So I'm afraid that's a joke about economists being really no better than weather forecasters.
That's great. That's the best one I found. Economics joke that I found. That's great. I thought it was only there's a slight jab like that about physicists as well. They say, oh, we assume a spherical cow or a spherical car or whatever. But anyway, that's a wrap on the Science Show with Dr. Dada, your weekly fix for breakthrough discoveries and the buzzing science scene across Scotland. Please share your questions, feedback anytime at our social media handles. And we say a big thanks to you, our listeners, the whole Jambo Radio crew, and our supporters at IOP Scotland, the University of Glasgow, and the EPSRC IAA team. I'm Dr. Dada, and please keep it locked right here. And as always, stay curious.
Because of you, my darling, all the while I be your Charlie. All the crazy things I've seen, my darling, to be with you, my darling, I no go figure cool it. Hey, baby, you the one for me, you the only parcel of me. And what you they do to me, you they driving me crazy, baby, there's no fighting.